Determined to stick together and to the deal, EU leaders and Iran's foreign minister say their talks have been constructive. The deal will only survive if Tehran continues to reap sufficient economic benefits, that is, if it continues to do business with Europeans. Something that's becoming increasingly complicated with the US reimposing sanctions. Here's a quick listen to Iranian foreign minister and the EU's foreign policy chief at the end of their talks in Brussels.
We together regretted the withdrawal of the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, and we recognise that the lifting of nuclear-related sanctions and the normalisation of trade and economic relations with Iran constitute essential parts of the agreement. And we stressed the commitment we all share to ensure that this will continue to be delivered, and we agreed to this end to deepen our dialogue at all levels.
We started the process. I believe we are on the right track. Now, a lot depends on what we can do within the next few weeks, and I believe it's a good start. We're not there. We're beginning the process, and we need to receive those guarantees. We will see how best we can move forward.
How long are you going to give this?
We said a few weeks.
Well, the Iran nuclear deal will be high on the agenda as EU leaders gather for a summit this Wednesday. To find out a bit more, we can cross now live to Dave Keating in Brussels. Dave, they're saying the talks were constructive so far, but what really came out of it?
Well, the main thing that had to be accomplished in yesterday's talks was signaling. Iran had to signal that it's willing to stay in the deal, even with the economic pain that will come from the return of U.S. sanctions. The return of those sanctions essentially mean that the terms of the deal as originally agreed will not be met. The EU countries had to signal A, that they're willing to stay in the deal even with the U.S. pulling out, and B, they're willing to economically compensate Iran in some way for the return of those U.S. sanctions. And that's really the key question here, is whether the EU can maintain strong and unified against the Trump administration on this issue. And on this, Iran is skeptical. Hence the language yesterday that we're on the right track, that we'll see what comes in the next weeks. It was foreign ministers meeting in Brussels yesterday. And so, a lot of this signaling needs to come from the leaders of EU countries. Federica Mogherini, the EU's foreign policy chief, said yesterday that at this point, the Iran deal is like a relative in intensive care, that you want to get out of intensive care as quickly as possible. But of course, this is really tricky, and it all depends on whether or not the EU will stand firm. Now, right now, for the moment, while the EU foreign ministers said they can make no legal guarantees about the continuing of economic activity with Iran, for the moment, oil and gas trade, bank transactions, all of those types of things that were allowed as part of this deal will continue going forward while these very difficult talks proceed.
And of course, EU leaders are meeting today for a summit. Iran definitely going to be high on that agenda, but also another important topic up for discussion, and that's the situation in Gaza. And there is some divisions across the EU.
Yeah, this was actually a pre-planned summit. It's dealing with the accession of Western Balkan countries like Serbia and Bosnia into the EU. But of course, they figured as long as they have the leaders of EU countries together in one room, they'd better talk about the really very pressing issues of Iran and Gaza as well. So there will be an informal dinner tonight in Sofia, Bulgaria, between these EU leaders, during which the Iran issue will be discussed. Now, they may or may not come out with some kind of statement of solidarity that would show their intent to really stand by this deal. But of course, also the Gaza situation will be discussed. EU leaders are incredibly split on this. We're unlikely to see any kind of unified statement condemning the violence. But of course, they will have very heated discussions on that Gaza issue tonight.
Okay, Dave Keating in Brussels. Thanks indeed for that. Dave Keating there reporting for us.